Okay, so welcome to the app and module evaluation talk.
I'm Craig McNally. I'll be co-presenting with Jeremy Huff, Kristen Martin, and Alexis Mannheim. We're representing both the technical and the product councils. Oops. So the agenda for today will look something like this. We'll give a quick introduction, then we'll go into the product council review process. We'll do the same thing for the technical council review process, present some scenarios, and then finally at the end there's a little workshop. So hopefully you guys are ready to participate. And first, we'll hit on some definitions so we're all aligned on what we're talking about here. So a Folio app is a cohesive set of functionality that fulfills a defined business purpose and has a user interface. Not to be confused, that doesn't mean it has to be a GUI, but either a GUI or API. And it's composed of one or more Folio modules. A Folio module is a software component which comprises Folio apps. This is a high-level view of the combined processes for contributing new features to Folio. So if you see this, if you start at sort of the top left corner here, it's going to start with sort of an idea. I have an idea. I have something that I want to build and contribute to Folio. We encourage contributors to engage the project, either the TC, the PC, or SIGs, as needed early in that process. So don't necessarily wait until you have something built and ready to go. Engaging the councils and the SIGs early on is definitely encouraged. Eventually, at some point, whether that happens or not, you'll have something that you're ready to submit, contribute to the community for review. And here we're talking about in the context of getting it included into an official Flower release. So now we're on sort of the bottom layer here. The first step of the review process is getting through the PC. And we'll drill down into each of these processes in a little bit more detail, so I won't go into too much now. The next step is going through the TC review process. Assuming everything goes well with both of those, the contributor would sign an MOU. And then finally, your contribution would be included into the next official Flower release. So I'll hand it over to Kristen to walk us through the product council review.
Hello. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the review process from the product council standpoint. This is a review process that's relatively new. It was approved on May 2nd. We're doing kind of a 6-month, we're calling it our pilot, so we can check in and see how it's going. So one of the things that we wanted to clarify when we put this process in place is that the product council is really interested in a functional area and is working at that app level. So, we're interested in understanding overall functionality, including the details of how individual modules work together to deliver proposed features. So, it's not necessarily at the module level and at the code level. If there's already a developed area that needs to put some new code into new modules, but it's really kind of covering the same apps, you don't have to do a new review process. But if it is a new module, it would then start at the technical council review process from the technical council. So, one of the things that we were noting about kind of the difference between where the product council was coming from and where the technical council is coming from is that in the product council, we like folks to come to us kind of early. Like, we don't care if it's really a fully baked product. Even if your ideas are still in process, it's a chance for us to talk and hear about things, know what things might be coming down the roadmap. And just, we can suggest working with SIGs, we can drum up interest for something, so that we can just help create a strong product. And you don't have to do that, but it is something that we encourage. I think when it comes down to the technical council review, because they're really looking at code, that's more of closer to the finished process. I'm going to show some items here on our wiki and our criteria. And I think we're like having fun with computers. This is showing up. Perfect. Okay. So I'm just going to scroll down here. We came up with these. There's a small group of us that worked on some of these, and like, what are some of the things that we're looking for from the product council? First of all, we just want to know, like, what are you up to? Like, what's the reason? What's the gap? What's the use case? How is it helping maybe Folio fill a market need where maybe you heard like, oh, this is something Folio doesn't do, but people are asking for it. And then, understanding a little bit like, how is the app going to be built? Like, how would it integrate with other modules? What are some of the areas that might, where it might need to work with what's already there? And we're also interested in, is it something unique, or is it something that Folio already does, but maybe it's offering to do it in a different way, or it's supporting like, use cases that might be different at a regional level, but maybe we want to have, both options available in a flower release. Is there a reason why maybe what's there right now doesn't work for existing institutions? So scrolling through, we also are interested in how it's going to work with existing features. That are in Folio. What are the dependencies? How would they need to be addressed? Does our app interactions sake, would it be good to talk to them if there's things maybe that would impact sort of across the whole release? And then it's also good to know, let's see if we can get you rolled into testing. Right now, our testing is pretty much through BugFest. If there's another mechanism for testing, we'd want to have something tested in that way. I think especially like with a team, being able to work on some of that quality assurance, knowing what the test cases are, and just providing some of that support. We also, under the product council, we are working to maintain our documentation. And so if there is documentation that's out there, it's great to be able to work with our documentation working group, share that information about, what this app is, how it works. That's obviously going to happen more toward the end. As opposed to like in the early stages, you're not going to have that documentation. And this is where in some ways talking to the PC, even after we've said, hey, this is a good idea, we approve this, coming back and just making sure that as things get developed, that there's communication sort of throughout the whole process, whether directly with the PC or with the SIG. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy.
Thank you. Howdy, folks. So recently, the Technical Council put out a video where we went in depth over the Technical Council review process. And I don't know if any of y'all saw that video, but it was me doing probably a much better job of the thing I'm about to do right now. So if y'all could all just remember fondly back to that video, that's going to help us all out. And you'll probably recognize a lot of these slides. So our process is a process that basically takes these three roles: submitter, evaluator, and development team point of contact. And these three roles work together to move through these 4 steps: submission, evaluation, review, feedback, and approval or rejection. So all the slides that follow from this point are basically going to be diving into those steps and the way that those different roles, the responsibilities of those roles on those steps. So let's get into it. So the submission process. The submission is initiated by a PC approved submitter. So it is our intent that the TC review process only happens after a group developing a module has already been in contact with the PC and has already gotten approval from the PC. So we're expecting the person who initiates this process is somebody who has kind of been encouraged by the PC to do that explicitly. Let's see, ideally a member of the PC, I want to make sure I don't miss any, or a delegate of the PC defined in the process overview. We have some documents. There'll be a list of documents that are relevant to this process at the end of these slides. The submission is done through a JIRA form on our TCR board, and it moves through our TCR workflow that is outlined in the in our documentation. The submission requires that the submitters perform a self-evaluation. The self-evaluation is the same evaluation that is ultimately going to be performed by the evaluators who evaluate the module. But the reason we put this at the beginning of the process is because we want to give the folks submitting a module the opportunity to kind of do a sanity check before they even start the process to see, well, is our application ready to go? And we highly recommend that if you do the self-evaluation and you find yourself failing yourself on certain criteria, that you do not advance the draft submission into the submitted state, that you go ahead and iterate on your product until it gets to a point where at least you feel good about how it performs on the self-evaluation. That's going to really help out. Some of the interactions from the TC at this point in time after the module has been put into the submitted state is you're going to see the TC assign specific evaluators to the JIRA ticket. We might request some additional information. There might be some back and forth between the TC and the submitters. And it's possible, depending on the specific application, if we're really wanting to wrap our mind around what's being submitted, that we might request a demonstration of the application. And all of this communication should take place on the JIRA board on the specific ticket, though that doesn't mean that additional communication can't happen out of band like on Slack, but we're going to try to keep a record of these kind of back and forth conversations on the JIRA ticket. So, all right, we can move ahead. Once evaluators have been assigned and the ticket has been submitted, we go into the evaluation stage. All right. The evaluation is going to be completed by the evaluators using the exact same evaluation template that's used for the self-evaluation. So the same criteria is going to be used, but this time the TC appointed evaluators are the ones evaluating the module against that criteria. There might be some back and forth between the evaluators and the submitters for clarification. I know in times when I've done this process, there's been a lot of communication between myself and the submitters to just kind of clarify certain details. It's supposed to take less than 3 weeks. And upon completion of the evaluation, the TC is going to begin its review. The evaluation will be presented to the TC. That begins at the close of the evaluation, begins the review process. The TC is going to review the evaluation that the evaluators have submitted. And it's okay for the evaluation to either pass or be rejected based on either an explicit vote or our lazy consensus process. The TC is going to make a decision on the module to either accept or reject the evaluation. So this is a key distinction, that the evaluators are going to finish their evaluation and they might say, looks good to us. They might say it doesn't look good to us, but the TC reserves the right to accept or reject the module in question based on the vote at the TC and the discussion at the TC at that time. In all likelihood, in the vast majority of circumstances, the way that the TC votes is most likely going to be consistent with the results of the evaluation. But we did want to reserve for edge cases the possibility that the TC might feel strongly that things should not be consistent with the results of the evaluation. And so when the TC's vote is not corroborating the results of the evaluation, it's a burden that's placed on the TC to provide a written justification for why there was a discrepancy there. Okay. Once the vote is done, we get into the feedback, acceptance, or rejection portion of the review process. And in either case, whether it was accepted or rejected, the results are going to be published, and we will identify the parties that we feel like the specific stakeholders that need to be notified of the results of that process. Did I miss anything?
Like the release, Alexi.
Yeah. So because this process is contingent on the inclusion of the module in the release, the release management folks are always going to be interested parties that are notified. Okay. These are some pages that are important, documentation that's important to this process. Everything that I went over is contained in more detail on these documents. We have a new module technical evaluation, wiki landing page that kind of gives you basically the links that you see up on the page here. We have a process overview document. Specifically for submitters, we have the acceptance and values criteria. So you can look over the criteria that a module is going to be evaluated on. The evaluation template that can be used for both the self-evaluation and for the evaluation. And for the folks who might be working these evaluations on the TC side of things, which incidentally, I didn't mention this, but the folks doing the evaluation have not always been TC elected members. They are folks who have been nominated by the TC to perform these evaluations. So there's JIRA workflow description and also the specific TCR board that the technical council uses to track the progress of our submissions through the process. I think we're done. I think we got there. I think that's all of it. You can go ahead. All right. Should we take questions on that?
We have time, right?
Yeah, we got plenty of time. So I'm going to go ahead. That was a lot of stuff. And y'all might have questions for Kristen or myself, but we see one over here.
Sometimes I'm just wondering what kind of vote, majority.
So we really, sorry. So the question was, sometimes this comes down to a vote. What kind of vote? So we really only have one expressed rule for voting in the technical council. And so this falls subject to that one rule. And the rule basically is this. For anything, the default is lazy consensus unless somebody calls for a vote. If someone does call for a vote, then it's a simple majority at that point. There has to be a quorum present. And if there is, then we base it on majority. So any other questions? I'm going to expound on that a little bit. You said it may come to a vote sometimes. Oftentimes what I've seen with this is there are some times when modules are coming through and just based on the thoroughness of the evaluation or the presentation and maybe the specifics of the module being, some modules are more complex than others. Sometimes it's just pretty cut and dry what's going on. It just it's very obvious. And other times there's been lengthy discussions and lots of back and forth. And so typically what I've noticed is in instances where there's been a lot of discussion, people feel just more comfortable with, kind of a formal vote. Whereas if it seems like it's all been pretty straightforward for everyone involved, we might lean on lazy consensus at that point. Any other questions?
There, Mike.
Oh, any online? Did I?
Oh.
Oh no. That's weird. I wonder why. Oh.
There is another
Maybe
question
you're
that just
sharing the PowerPoint and then you showed the
There's another question. What about Mod OA?
Mod OA went through this process and I think it was approved, right?
It was rejected based on exactly what criteria it failed.
Test coverage, I believe, is what it was. Fortunately, the JIRA ticket will be around, and we can pull up the the historical record there. But yeah, I do believe. And another thing that happens often is that you will have both a UI module and a backend module moving through the process at the same time, and these will be handled by separate evaluators and tracked by separate TCR tickets. And so, in an instance like that, you can end up in a situation where the UI passes or the backend doesn't pass or vice versa, which can put a development team in an awkward situation, since you're going to need both pieces to have your full functionality. But there's something I didn't get into that I really should have. I really want to stress, and that's that I think all of us in the TC have been kind of uncomfortable with the word rejection. It sounds so harsh. And we really probably need to get some better branding on that, because it's our intent that this process is iterative. It's not just like a one-shot thing. You get infinite retries. You can turn around and resubmit it immediately afterwards. The evaluators, if they happen to be the same folks, are going to be well familiar with the process and with your particular application. And so it's from the very onset of this process in the TC, we intend it for an evaluation an evaluation that ends a rejection to not just kind of stop there. We very much expected, the developers to kind of turn around and, just address whatever the failing criteria was and resubmit. And so rejection just sounds so ugly. I don't know if y'all have any ideas for a better word. Let us know.
Delayed.
Revise and resubmit.
Yeah. It's not a game over. You get infinite lives. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, if there's no other questions, we're going to dive into some scenarios here. These are we have one kind of silly one coming up that we're going to get into, and then we're going to take a look at just some of the real life ways in which things have moved through this process. In all honesty, the first one that I'm going to describe here is a hypothetical process that's kind of the golden path through this process. This is our ideal imagining of how a module might move through the totality of this process. That's going to be followed up by some real life scenarios, none of which look like that ideal path through the process. So in reality, I don't think it's ever happened exactly the way that we're hoping for it to happen, which is part of why we're ourselves iterating on these things and trying to strengthen our approach to this evaluation process. But you can go ahead. All right, so Craig went over this slide, and so we're going to use it as a basis to kind of walk through how a module might be approached. So you can advance because we really want people to start over here. We want to encourage people to engage the councils early. We're going to not pay attention to this one. So I think if you advance it, that might disappear. Yeah, that's the idea, right? So we're going to start over here. You're going to have an idea. Since we're in Chicago, we're going to talk about Mod Chicago Dog. That's the great new module idea. There's a lot of discussion that could be had about this. I did some research, and there are hot debates about the Chicago Dog. So you might go to the SIG and get the details on whether or not it's going to have ketchup or not. Apparently, that says yeah. All right, we have some thoughts already. All right, you can approach the PC with your brand new idea and find out the specific number of sport peppers that need to be on this Chicago Dog. And maybe as your idea takes some shape from a technical perspective, you might want to find out, if you're going to need that poppy seed bun or not. And I jokingly, say we have an RFC about the poppy seed bun. You don't have to do an RFC for your module, but this is just an example of the sort of tool that the technical council has put out there to kind of facilitate engaging the technical council on specific technical questions that you might have, right? So these are the nature of the sorts of conversations we imagine people having about their modules. Maybe topics of more significance than this, or maybe there are no topics more significant than these. I don't know, but you can go ahead. Once the plan has kind of entered a finalized state, we recommend that is the point where you actively start engaging the product council on their express evaluation process. So you can see that if you achieve the exact right shade of neon green, the PC they're gonna like it. You're gonna pass their criteria there. Further on down the road, after you've had an implementation, you've gotten some stuff actually together. I kind of threw the word MVP out there for minimally viable product. The TC is interested in evaluating a module that has had something implemented on it, right? So this is definitely going to be later on in the process. You can submit a TCR ticket to the TC. We'll go through our review and determine whether or not you pass. Let's see. Apparently, there's a debate on whether or not you steam or boil the Chicago dog. I hear boiled is the right way to go. Anyone? I don't know. Boil? All right. We're getting down to the bottom of it. Once you pass, a fully approved Chicago dog app will be brought to the CC. You can sign an MOU, and then you will be included in the next release well ahead of the New York style dog. Yeah. Yeah. So it's got a happy ending, right? Okay. Y'all were very kind to me just then. Thank you. That's all right. That's kind of our take on like the ideal path through. And now Kristen will lead us through some examples of some of the realities of actually working through this process at different times and some of the different things that have happened.
Yeah. So, not to bring up politics, but in 2016, this the then candidate Trump came to Chicago and was speaking at the UIC forum, and there was a protester outside who said, "Trump puts ketchup on his hot dogs." So serious stuff here. Yeah. All right. So we're going to kind of do some tag teaming, talking through some recent new features and apps and modules that have come through. So the first example is actually a module called Mod Settings, and it was a new module that was designed to correct security defects that were in mod config. And I'll admit this example happened before we had approved the app review process. So at the time, the PC was reviewing all of the new modules and then providing their input to the technical council before the technical council review. And as such, we had a lot of conversation on Slack, like, should we be reviewing this or not? We've been trying to get this process in place. And is this really, do we have to weigh in? It's a security problem. Greg was nice. He's like, if you guys don't want to do it, just tell me. But we decided, we had a conversation about it. We ultimately did do a vote to include it. And then we said, okay, we really gotta wrap up this discussion we're having about how we want to do this review so that we can feel more confident when we should be doing a review and when we shouldn't. And so we did that, and then we turned it over to the technical council. And I don't know if Jeremy, you want to talk at all about the challenges there around the configuration?
Had not planned on.
Okay, well, we won't get into that, but just as an example of some of the complications here, this was actually sort of replacing functionality that was in Folio to try to address some security concerns.
I can speak to that a little bit. So what ended up happening when this came to the TC is it checked all the boxes on the acceptance criteria. And so for that reason, we accepted it, and it made it into the next flower release. I forget, maybe that was Orchid or Nolan, I forget. But we also let the contributors know that we're also going to take a closer look at take a step back and take a broader look at how configuration should be handled in Folio, whether or not we want to take a sort of a distributed configuration approach or a centralized approach, which is what this mod settings is more of a centralized thing. So that subgroup has formed. It's been sort of on pause because summertime is busy and vacations and WOLFcon and everything else. So it's in progress, and the plan is to come up with an RFC and go through that process and have in-depth discussions with the rest of the technical council and community about that. But yeah, as far as the review process went, since the module met all the criteria set out by the TC, it was approved and is now part of Folio.
All right, so we'll move on to another example that came up which came to the product council called Service Interaction. And this module is designed for cross-app configuration functionality and includes a new UI to allow for this configuration. That said, the main purpose of getting this new app in was to provide some control settings for a number generator. So we kind of, we had like a little bit of a cognitive disconnect, like what is this exactly? Was kind of a challenge for the product council to think about. It wouldn't be like a functional area as you might think of in a, a traditional like LSP, but it did have this purpose, and there was no app that it really lived in before. So it was kind of more of a feature that was looking for an app. And we agreed, a number generator sounds good. So we did pass it along to go to the technical council, where it is still under review. And I think points to one of the challenges here around sort of the sizing of different apps or modules, because a lot more stuff could go into service interaction and then is essentially like already approved, because we kind of approved it under the number generator scenario, but whatever other, cross app configuration functionality could go there too. And since this review process is not really looking at code that goes into existing apps or modules, it's in a little bit of an unusual space there. So here our third example, consortia, or sometimes you may have seen the word ECS, which is extended consortial support. So we had a little breakdown here in that there were two technical council reviews that were submitted prior to having a conversation with the product council. Now the product owner did come to the PC to discuss these consortia app, but actually the work had already been done in the TC, so it didn't really follow the boxes. So we never really voted on it. I mean, we had a conversation, we talked about it, we had some concerns around what this might mean for people using Folio that weren't in consortia. They would have to get this app. We started talking about, potential architectural changes to Folio, so you wouldn't, but we're not really at that state right now. Right now, things go into the Flower release. So we didn't really get a total resolution on, the idea on whether consortia could be split out into like a separate platform. And I think, you can hear that still being discussed here at WOLFcon. If you got a chance to hear some of what like Vince and Todd were talking about with looking at realizing apps and being able to label them and then label them in platforms. There's some ways to help with that, but that's, doesn't really help us maybe with our kind of immediate process. So we got one more example here. This one is in process. So far, we heard from the product owner that this idea came out of, EBSCO was talking to customers, and customers were saying like, hey, we're on III and they have this cool thing called create lists. What can you do like that? And the answer was, right now we don't have anything, but we could. I mean, let's think about this. Like, we're hearing this as a need, and that's exactly the type of thing like you have like a market need. So we got a chance to see a prototype of it in the PC, and we said, hey, this is really cool. We want this to move forward. And it's still a work in progress, so it hasn't yet been submitted through the technical council as, new modules, but that'll be something that we'll anticipate happening. So some observations on this process, I guess, that we feel like we're still working through the 6-month pilot period. And I think, looking at this, there is definitely new functionality that's being built for Folio. I mean, it's a system that is still growing and evolving and trying to meet new users' needs. But some of the obvious big new apps that you might think about when you think about like what should, an LSP do, they're not really, they're there already. It's a more mature product. So we're not seeing like big new apps that you would think of. So if functionality is not always fitting neatly into these areas. So, that's one of the reasons why we're kind of having a little talk here, is think about, could we help improve this process? Additionally, like the community council, when we had conversations with them, we heard a lot about wanting to make sure that new functionality that was contributed would be supported, that people would be committed to continuing to support it over time. And they haven't yet developed an MOU for these contributions. So that part hasn't been, and it was sort of at the community council's option. So we've left that in their hands. So, you know, so that's still kind of ongoing. I think from the product council, our process still feels a bit amorphous. And some of it is, you know, to some extent, like we're here, we want to support what folio institutions need. Like, we don't want to just sort of like Jeremy says, we don't want to reject you, right? I mean, if you say it's important, like some of our job is to help see how we can make it work with folio versus be like telling you no. And I think, the technical council has a much more clearly defined set of criteria. So they can say you have a retry here because you're really not meeting these needs, or we have these major concerns about things. And it's a little more concrete, at least to my mind. Now, I know there's also lots of shades of gray there. So I think we kind of have the issue of the size and the scope on what's an app, what's a module. We also, you know, we haven't address, say, any new functionality that's going into existing modules. And it would be really interesting, although extraordinarily time consuming, to try to apply like some of these criteria to code that's already out there. And just, you know, as part of, I think, sort of that technical debt and making sure that folio is working to the best of its ability. And then, as I mentioned, also looking ahead at some of the architectural changes that have been proposed and that are still getting worked on in a model, that could radically change things too. And that might also really help with more flexibility and help people, because right now, you know, it's kind of, you get everything, and whether or not you want to use it, it's there. And then you just sort of ignore it if you don't want to use it. But that, you know, providing some more flexibility is one more thing that we're thinking about.
I'm just going to say a few words and then I'm going to hand it off to Alexis. But so we had an hour and a half time slot for this, and we knew that the things that we needed to tell y'all about the process were not going to take up an hour and a half. But we also know that historically, both in the PC and the TC, these processes have that there's been often a lot of feelings and different ideas about the nature of the process, some confusion historically about them. And so part of the discussion that we've had internal to our councils over the last year or so dealing with these processes is our need for engaging the community and making sure that we're in a conversation with the folio community about these processes and how they can grow and change and better fit the needs of the community. So we thought that we could take advantage of this time that we have here, you know, in this room with you or with our remote participants, and try to elicit some feedback on various topics concerned with both the PC and the TC evaluation process, and maybe how these processes can work together. We don't know exactly what you might want to talk about, but we wanted to set aside some time where we could dive into topics that seem like they're of interest to everybody. So we decided to do a jam board in order to do that. And Alexis is going to go over what that is going to look like. Now, I have to say that if I had known that this was going to be the last presentation of the conference, I don't know if I would have decided that a jam board is the best thing, because it requires all of you to, participate with it. So I feel like we're asking a lot, but I'm going to ask it anyway for all of y'all to dig deep and help us out and just give us that last push to close out this WOLFcon with some great comments and suggestions. That would be awesome. All right. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so I put the link in the Zoom chat and also in the WOLFcon 23 Slack channel. So folks have their laptops or their phones, you can click on it and go to the Jamboard. So folks have probably done this before, but if you haven't, you can just click on the sidebar to add a sticky, add a topic, a question for the group, an issue for us to follow up on, feedback on the process or the scenarios, or what are the big picture implications that we haven't thought of, or maybe we have, but you're concerned about. And then once you do that, so everybody put in a sticky, put in more than one sticky. And then the next step will be for folks to vote on.
Sorry.
Something's missing. There were words there. Okay. For folks to vote on all of these stickies, put +1s in the actual text of the sticky. I had this idea to do a little B, but then if you move the sticky, the B doesn't go with it. So I don't want to do that. So we're going to do +1 on the actual sticky. Once we have our voting done, then we'll take the top 3 topics and discuss them.
All right. I'm going to try and stop sharing for a second to make sure that I'm able to actually share the screen here so everyone can see it.
If that doesn't.
Oh,
Picture.
okay.
I have it up on another tab.
Okay. Online folks, can y'all see a wiki right now?
Yes.
All right. And can you see?
I can see people joining, so that's good.
Cool. All right, so we got one topic here. How can we communicate the benefits and purpose of module and app evaluation to the community to gain more buy-in and support for the process? You know what? I'm going to participate with this too, because you should lead by example. And I'm going to add something on here. I'm going to try to type with one hand. Let's see how this works. How can we or could we and folks, it's fine if you end up putting in a topic that is the same as somebody else's. That's allowed. Nice. And Alexis, did you tell people how many they could vote on? Okay. All right.
Put as many stickies on for your ideas as right.
Do we put +3 on one?
Jesse, you can, but nobody else.
The nice thing, you can't really tell who put.
Y'all are doing so great. I'm so proud of everybody. Full disclosure, I was part of an adventurous group that did a shot in the bar this afternoon. Yeah, this guy back here. Yeah, just one. But I'm feeling at this moment a little tired, and I'm thinking it might have been a mistake. I don't know if that was the best decision I ever made before coming in here and giving a talk. Great stuff. While you are doing this, I'm going to just mention that in preparing for this discussion, both the PC and the TC talked about this process right here. And we very much want to communicate to all of you that we want to make a commitment to discuss the things that come out in this conversation beyond just this meeting. You know, these are things that we intend to incorporate into our process of refinement as we iterate on these approaches. Hey, are we allowed as moderators, are we allowed to +1 anything?
The folio community, you were also participating.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we're gonna wrap this up in about a minute or so. I'm seeing some great stuff. And in about a minute, we'll switch to just voting, where everybody's got to pick 3 things. Ha! Is that possible? I have never seen more stuff on a hot dog than these Chicago dogs. I don't know.
The Chicago dog, it's either or.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Okay. These are, I see some great stuff. Honestly, from my perspective, I'd be happy to spend a lot of time talking about any of these stickies, but we're going to pick 3, and we're going to do that by you folks selecting your favorite 3 to +1. And it's fine if you want to +1 your own, I suppose. I don't know. But yeah, pick 3, add a +1 to it, and we'll just count them up.
And I think you could vote. You could put all 3 votes on the same one, right?
Yeah, that's fine. We're gonna just play fast and loose with this. If you want to throw 3 +1s down on one sticky, go for it. And this is honor system also, folks, because I'm not counting how many times you +1. So.
+1 on.
Yeah.
All right, and I'm hoping my astute colleagues up here are doing some quick math.
You should be able to zoom in on the whole Jamboard if you want. Really don't like it.
All right, one more minute for voting, and then we're going to figure out what 3 topics we'll dive into a little bit more.
You want that.
First 3 +4s. 4 +4s.
Okay, we're going to call voting done now. All right. Great job, folks. What winners do we have? I see we got this. How can we communicate the benefits and purpose of module of module and app evaluation to the community to gain more buy-in and support for the process? That's a great question. It's got +4. Is there a risk that the evaluation process could get in the way of innovation and new direction for Folio? That's another great question. Got a +4. But we got 4 +4s here. Is that right?
That's all.
Oh, I'm sorry. What am I doing? Wasting my time with these +4s.
Yeah, yeah, those two are both +5.
Two big ones on the left.
Yeah, that I made bigger.
Okay. All right. Is there a risk that the evaluation? Okay. Yeah. So we got that one. And then,
Architectural.
okay. And so, Alexis, would you mind copying and pasting those to the next few? You are awesome.
The first. Okay, so
Oh, look at that. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is going to be a little bit less structured than what we just did, if that is possible. So we're going to dive in on an open discussion on this, but we really want to capture the things that people are saying here. So once again, feel free to kind of put your thoughts and comments out on the screen, and then we're just going to kind of get it out there. But as you guys are maybe putting your observations on sticky notes on here that we can then discuss in group, I want to know, if I'm going to out somebody here, who here submitted this ticket? Anyone? Jesse, would you mind if I run over there and give you the mic? You just kind of share the thoughts behind bringing this up. All right.
So what I was thinking when putting this in there is, if people present something that's either, I don't know, a little counter to architecture or a little counter to some of the other ways we've put Folio together thus far, because it needs to do that in order to do what it's going to do, and it's taking things in a new direction that maybe we haven't seen in library systems or whatever it might be. Could there be a barrier essentially to getting that new idea, that some innovation into the system? And I guess that's what I'm thinking there.
And Todd has his hand up.
I sort of think that the answer to that can only be yes. And maybe the question, maybe a question to think about is, when do we want what kind of barrier do we want? There's a kind of intent of review and what's the community going to take ownership of, but to not be onerous. So it might be a right sizing.
I see Harry's hand up, and I'm going to head down there. On the way, I'm going to say that we have, as part of the technical council review process, a officially approved technology list that we evaluate modules with. And I have often had concerns of the nature of, if you have an innovative technology that you want to introduce to the project, but it's not on the list, is that going to get in the way? So I think these are definitely things worth thinking of.
So I think with the current status of the project, and especially, I guess, what we might call the platform, I think there definitely is a risk. And I think this is something we've got to think about in the PC when we're evaluating, right, these projects. But I also think slightly longer term, hopefully slightly longer term, as some of the platform changes that are being proposed eventually get implemented, as we start to really put ourselves in a position where the model or the platform model that's been described at this conference comes into play. I think we actually end up putting ourselves into a position where maybe not as many decisions are needed by the PC for approval, as some of these apps start to move in those higher tiers where it's not necessary to include them in the build and release them with all the other Folio apps. People then should be in a position where they can start to choose on their own if they want these or not, right?
Yes.
May I ask a question for you, Harry, on that? So you're seeing that the PC process is the risk of where there's the getting in the way of innovation. And I'm wondering, have you heard anything in particular about the PC? I'm asking this totally honestly because it is a new process. And if people felt like they shouldn't, the PC was, I mean, in some ways, I think I've sort of thought like we want everybody to get everything that they want.
So no, I haven't seen that as of yet. Although we did have an example above there of consortia. And consortia is kind of an interesting one because 99% of what's there is actually architecture, features, and functionality that cross apps that already exist, right? Yes, there is one little app, a configuration or a settings app or whatever the case may be, but that really doesn't represent the functionality of what's coming, or at least what's being delivered. And so, there's confusion and or I don't know if confusion, well, maybe it is confusion, right? The PC wasn't exactly sure how to or what to approve. And I think we're going to see more and more of these things over time. And I'm not complaining, it's not bad. It's just, there's going to be gray areas, and that's going to be one of them. And at some point, we're just going to have to make a decision, do we accept them or do we not? And even if it doesn't conform to, in some cases, what our standard definitions are, what an app might be, or whatever the case may be. So I'm not sure if I even answered what you just asked.
Yeah, that's awesome. You guys are helping me out with my exercise.
So I think part of this goes back to that sort of teal colored oval and the high level process overview that essentially encourages folks that want to contribute something to engage the community early in the process, right? To start those conversations sooner so that we can get out in front of it and it's not like held up at the TC review because there's some architectural thing that makes us scratch our heads, right? If you engage the community early and have those discussions and go through an RFC process or whatever, then you can avoid some of the miscommunications potentially. Have those conversations before you build it, right?
So that same one is probably a pretty good example, right? I guess some of the consortia functionality, because that discussion has been ongoing in the TC, and the majority of that really before any code really was even written. And the time frame we've had to build it is extremely limited, but all things considered, those discussions actually did happen kind of early. And so I guess I'm agreeing with you.
It's not bulletproof, but no, it's the best we can do right now, I think.
I wanted to draw our attention to a couple of these sticky notes that have been put up here, but I'm missing one of them. One said that it should be easier for that disappear. It said that it should be the process should be collaborative, and it should be, oh, here we go. Process should be collaborative and friendly, so it actually makes it easier to know how to get your module in Folio. And I think we all totally agree with that. But this idea of modules like being easy to get into Folio, in some senses, I think is in tension with this sticky note right up here. So that says the evaluation determines what is Folio. If that process is too stringent and fails, the institutions who have needs and the value of Folio name decreases. And I think that there is this tension that exists in what we're trying to do here, because we definitely want to provide a quality product to the people who are using Folio, and quality and standards are very closely associated with each other. But we are also trying to build a healthy and collaborative project that definitely crowdsources a lot of the effort that's involved in building Folio. So I think that at the heart of what we've been trying to do is figure out what the healthy balance is between those two tensions. And these things are great. Let's see. Are there any sticky notes that we haven't? This one's interesting. It can be hard to determine what's an app. And this is something that easily it could have been one of the topics that we talked about, I think, all by itself, because, this is the new module evaluation process, right? And we have all this discussion of this idea of the app, which is a collection of modules. And I think that these processes are definitely going to have to figure out how they're going to respond to this concept of an app. Are we going to be evaluating apps as collections of modules, or still evaluating just the individual modules within the applications? This definitely echoes a lot of the stuff in our presentation, and we can't stress this enough. Yeah, have conversations before you build it, as Craig was saying. And let's see, we might change what Infolio means. Not everything might need to be in it. And I can say that we have definitely even seen examples of this. At Texas A&M, we run modules that are not in Folio. And I know I've heard of this happening in other places. And if y'all have seen over the course of this week, the application discussions that we've had on platforms and application definition, there's been this idea of platforms consisting of extra modules that are outside of the Flower release. And it is possible that if we start to embrace that idea, that it could alleviate maybe some of the tensions that have been experienced around these things.
Right in the middle, rename to new module support process.
Rename to new module support process. So whoever said that, I guess feels like maybe we have a branding issue with it, which I think is entirely possible. Maybe just the way that we have the language that we've attached to it has given maybe people certain impressions about what's going on. And I see another hand.
Yeah. Just real quick. Or module inclusion process.
Yes, I like that inclusion. That's very cool. We can probably pivot to another discussion unless there's any parting shots that anyone wants to make. Y'all are doing a great job, by the way. This is fantastic. Okay, well, let's see what we have next. I guess I need to do that. It's just going to happen for me. All right. Are there ways we can make the process more transparent or supportive for those that want to contribute new functionality? And this is a great segue from the suggestion that we just had. Maybe if we start by calling it something different, that can begin to give people different expectations for how they interact with it. But I'm going to leave a few minutes for us to get started putting some sticky notes up. If you don't mind, though, would someone mind raising their hand either in chat or in this room if they were the one to suggested this question in the first place? Awesome. All right, Kristen, you want to maybe expound on it a little bit?
Well, I added this here because I do feel like there's been some angst about it, and I know from some conversations, if for people that are product owners, like you just want to get your functionality out the door. And then I think in some ways this is like, what? Now I have to do this? Like, what is this thing? And where do we stand? And I think I'm thinking about how we're all ultimately trying to make Folio work for everybody. And we do have a governance structure. And for those of us that are, on the different councils, we have some obligations to try to, the product council is supposed to be thinking about the scope of folio. The technical council is reviewing, technical aspects. So how can we do this in a way that is supportive of the development process, that helps, keep folio on track, make folio better without, maybe feeling like this surprise and not a pleasant one? Or, one of the other things that I think is tricky is like, we don't want to make the timeline get too long either. So, if there's things to think about there too.
That's awesome. Well, as last time, if anyone wants to share sticky notes, as I see some people are doing, that's fine, but also feel free to raise your hand if you have any comments on this. So I like this first one that I saw pop up. Once we have some good examples that work from start to finish, share those with the community. So like sharing success stories. And I think that that's a great idea to try to, that would serve one to make people feel good about the fact that this, it's possible to get an app or a module all the way through the process, but then also to it would also serve to educate people on that process. Let's see. A new name would give people with different expectations new app module support process. Okay, yeah, carry over from the new PC approval of functionality first helps TC work faster with narrower scope. Yeah, I do think that the sequence of these things is really important because the TC doesn't need to be spending a lot of time evaluating something that that isn't intended to be a part of the product. So going to the product council first helps the TC to focus on things that the community has decided they want in the product. And feel free to raise your hand if you want to jump in on any of these topics. Improve documentation of the process, like the recent video from the TC. Thank you very much. Whoever said that, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm contemplating switching careers to being an influencer because I just, once you get that YouTube bug, man. No.
How many views are you up to?
I don't know, like 5. I think there's 5 views. Quarterly or some such frequency, summaries of examples of how the process has been applied to share out and make accessible. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, we just went through and shared out some of the examples of how the process had worked for some of the modules that have gone through. And I suppose that's very possible that we could make that more of like a regular report or something of that nature. I like that idea. Let's see. Put a positive spin on the process and stress that getting input will only improve your app. What about moving the evaluation process closer to the SIGs and having them feedback their experiences to the PC? I would like to hear more about that. Who shared that one? Oh boy. Would you mind expounding on that a little bit?
That's you.
Wonderful. It seems to me that SIGs are a place where you have subject matter experts who would have a lot to say about any particular area of functionality that may be added or improved. And so getting their perspective on it and then having the PC sort of delegate, say, hey, you're the group that would know about this. Give it a look and then tell us what you think. And then the PC can bring in additional sort of concepts of like, okay, it meets functional needs, but how does it fit with overall other things like branding or those kind of things? But I don't know, it's a lot to put on the PC specifically to be looking at these processes. Maybe there's some delegation that could happen.
I find that really interesting because it makes me think of the fact that in the TC, we oftentimes lean on non-TC members to assist with our evaluation process. Zach, and that is super helpful. It's very helpful to be able to rope folks in. Yeah, I find that very interesting. How about PC folks? I see some hands.
I really like that idea, and I think it's something where we wanted to say, like, you should, you know, you can work with the SIGs to make your product better. But I like the way you're framing it as more like you should talk to the SIG, like here's a SIG you should talk to, and they'll be able to, you know, help you, and then be able to have that communication with the SIG. I think the other thing this helps with is empowering people who are going to the SIGs right now, but maybe they're like, what kind of an influence do I really have on the project? Like, you know, it helps, I think also helps build the community. Like, I think that's a really, really excellent idea.
Yeah, I agree. I really like that idea. I wanted to say something about something that I learned a lot about at this WOLFcon, which is the technical side of how you get your functionality into Folio. Is not something I understood. I understand it a little bit now, still not a lot, but how that works with this process. I don't know. I'm thinking especially of folks that are new to the community. How like somehow combining all of this with all of that to make it an actual cohesive process for folks who haven't done it before. Because I think a lot of the folks who are doing it now have been doing it for a long time and they understand it. And for new institutions, it's super confusing.
Maccabee, are you still?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
I was also gonna +1 in suggestion, but before understanding the concern is that slows down work even more, right? This all leads back to the as early as possible conversations, right? The earlier that, you know, oh, I think I might build this app, the earlier that SIG conversation happens, it gets to then inform the dev team's work without slowing things down when it gets to the evaluation.
Yeah, I mean that's the purpose of that box. I mean, on that page, I mean, if you bring it to the PC or a SIG, if you know which SIG to go to, go straight to them. I mean, I don't think that the PC would have any objection to folks going straight to the SIGs. It's just that oftentimes the PC is the most visible representation of that part of the project in the community. So that's the avenue to bring it through and have an early discussion, and then the PC will point you in the right direction.
And I think maybe riffing on that, there could be a case where there's new radical functionality that's coming out that there isn't necessarily a SIG for yet. And maybe it could be the PC's remit to say, hey, we have this idea. There's this new thing that's people are clamoring for. Let's commission a SIG. You folks go have those conversations and spin that up and come back to us with what you've discovered, learned, talked about. So yeah, sorry.
All right, that's awesome stuff. And we have 15 minutes left. You guys have done so great. I mean, I guarantee you this is the most lively last session of the conference. So we got one more discussion left, but we don't have to move past this if anyone has any parting shots they want to add. Anyone? All right. Okay. How will changes to the architecture? Oh, I guess we ended up talking about this anyway. All right. Yeah. How will changes to the architecture, if we're able to formalize application descriptors and platform descriptors, affect the process? Yes, this is a great thing to talk about. Who shared this? All right. Well, would you mind expounding on that a little bit?
Well, I don't know if I can expound on it too much. It was just, it's been interesting hearing the ideas that were coming from, when like Vince, I'd heard some about it earlier. But just if that would help us maybe get rid of some of the ambiguity. I mean, that might not, I don't know, maybe that would already be there. So I was just more curious, maybe other people here have other ideas even like, because I don't know exactly.
I feel like I've been in every one of those sessions this week, and every single time I'm thinking this concept really helps delineate this process and make it a lot clearer and give definite scope to what each part of the council, each of the councils is doing in this process and what needs to go where and when. And I'm looking at this and I'm seeing nothing but good for this, for what we're doing with these two evaluation processes.
So, and feel free to be adding stickies or raising hands if y'all want to jump in on this conversation. But I have some questions about this because I've been thinking about this as soon as Craig and Vince started presenting on this stuff. And I started wondering about how it might impact this process. Here's a question I have. I know that the PC in the past have expressed, and you can nod your head yes or no, maybe I'm off base with this, but it seems like y'all have expressed some consternation with identifying what exactly is an app. You know, y'all have said, well, we want to confine our evaluation process at the app level, but what the heck is an app? So from that perspective, it seemed, as you said, it seems like how could formalization of the concept of the app not help the PC? My question is, would the TC similarly benefit from this? Or would it just indicate that once, if the PC starts shifting their evaluation process to this bundle of modules, do you think that means that we and the TC are going to see, like 4 or 5 TCRs all created at one time based on this? Any thoughts on that? All right.
Oh,
It does open a whole other thing that I was going to kind of bring up maybe tomorrow at the PC meeting, that the platforms part of this and the extended apps, what's an extended app and what's a platform. Yeah. And those two things I think are, to me at least, and at initial glance would fall under what the PC is discussing and kind of making decisions about.
Here you go, Craig.
Thank you. So to some extent, to answer the question you asked just before that, that's already happening, right? Typically you see when these TCRs are submitted, there's a UI module and a backend module. Well, in some cases that might be an application, right? Or maybe it's a part of an application. So to some degree, it's a matter of perspective and whether or not we want to make adjustments to our TC review process or new module process, whatever you want to call it, to be more aligned with an application, or if we're okay with reviewing or evaluating individual modules, whether they're submitted individually or sort of at the same time, right? But at a base level, I mean, there aren't any technical barriers to the way that the process works today, right? We are already getting things this way, so.
That comforts me a lot, that observation.
I think if you get up into the extended app area, it becomes kind of interesting, because then this approval process maybe becomes optional. I could see people building apps, releasing them. Anyone can, set them up and install them on their setup, supposedly, if they want to. But at the same time, the process as it's defined, there's a certain amount of value there, right? Because there's a certain minimum set of security requirements and, quality requirements and what have you, for example, that were set by the TC. And so, I could almost imagine then, it's time for us to do some marketing here and have, our brand of approval. So they're extended apps that, are fine and maybe even tested by libraries and seem to work. But then there's the ones that maybe someone optionally tried to move through the approval process and gets that extra stamp, which hopefully means a whole series of different things about the quality.
In fact, there's been some discussion at this WOLFcon so far as to what exactly is going to constitute the division between what's was labeled on the presentation as functional versus extra. And I suppose maybe the evaluation process could be at least part of that distinction for the purposes that you described, Harry.
Yeah, I was going to say some form of attestation or other, process that would go through to that the project maybe want to have on these apps to kind of give some sense of creating a cohesive not necessarily marketplace, but a cohesive set of things that folks would feel comfortable at, whether it's hosting providers or self-hosting institution would feel comfortable adding into as optional things into their environments.
I'm gonna take a look at what we have up here. PC should evaluate apps, not modules, for inclusion in any of the platforms they own. PC would evaluate the modules more directly, but have level criteria for determining if an app is at the functional level or extended level. That's very interesting. Consider a badging process for the outer app layer, like the branding focus on that. I love badges. PC has a role to play protecting the interests of libraries when the outer app layer comes along, making sure things don't actually get worse for libraries. I see this separate questions for PC and TC. Would anyone mind expounding on that? Yeah, all right.
Yeah, I should say I wrote that before Harry made the comment he made a minute ago that I think covered similar ground. TC has very specific criteria. It's hard for me to figure how many of the things we look at would apply on an app level, although there might be additional things we might look at an app level. PC, maybe a different question. One metric that Craig and I talked about the other day was sort of to look back over the last year and a half at all the new modules that were approved by both councils, or mostly TC because it's a newer process. And if those would have been added to existing apps and therefore not evaluated individually, would that have been a good thing or a bad thing? In some cases, it might be a good thing because there was no reason to. In some cases, even though they're added to an existing app, we might say, wait, that should have had a review. I don't know the answer to that. I'd be interested in finding out.
It's a really good question. Right. Let's see. For example, extended apps could be written in whatever language so long as they fit in the folio's architecture. It's very interesting. Would that make this process unneeded? But then what about marketing and security? Who would like to expound on that? Who?
What Harry was saying.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Would need to consider the platform and extended apps and how that intersects with the PC review. Platform considerations. This is a big question that I have. And I don't know who said this and if they want to expound on it, but yeah, I do wonder, we list out all these platforms and it was stated that platforms can contain common apps. So you could have an app in two different platforms. So let's just say there's a world where the PC is responsible for the release of a set of apps that's very core to the LSP. But then those same apps are present in another platform. Does that other platform also get governed by the PC? Or is there another council for that? These are like really confusing questions for me. I see a lot of his. The order I saw was Kristen. Yeah, okay. All right.
Well, I think sort of going along with that, the comment that's over there on the left about making sure things don't get worse for libraries too. Marketing, like we don't want there to be so many versions of Folio out there. Nobody knows what's going on. Like people are frustrated. It's not working the way they thought it was supposed to. And nobody's like got any oversight over those apps because you should have used those ones or this platform. So, I could see it getting a little confusing. Like we'd have to, I know we had a vision of being able to plug and play apps as on your phone store, but, I think for core business processes, you do have to have a certain level of reliability and knowing that what you're getting will do what it wants. And so I'm not sure coming down to the platform level, how that would end up being with the whole project. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the sense I got from those presentations was that distinction is kind of about what we're officially supporting through the community, testing and verification processes that we have in place, more than it is, I think there's a marketing potential win for a few things, like having like an ERM platform and an LSP platform and LSP, like a full LSP, those kinds of preset, especially if we get this into a situation where it's something that can be deployed more easily in an environment, having those prepackaged things that can be wrapped up into something someone can deploy, even if it's just in a trial environment, something that's like the equivalent of a Docker compose that they can just, run and get set up and going and kind of play around with on their own while they're in their evaluation phase. Those kinds of things could be useful, I think, marketing wise for the project and for the community.
Thank you. And I think Ian, did you have your hand up? And then Todd.
Riff on this. I think I remember what I was talking about. Yeah, it's late. It's been a long conference. So to me, it seems like it's trust levels and trust criteria. You have, there's the Folio, as we were seeing in the platform discussions, Folio Core, which seems to me more like a platform for names, but let's not get into semantics. The base makes the whole thing run. You have your set of sort of, these apps are core for this platform, this bundle. And one of those things is Folio LSP, the thing that has Flower releases. And then there's that extended sphere of, these are things we trust, but are not required and that we're not going to necessarily put through as rigorous a testing process. Yes, there is still some rigor there. There is still some vetting. You're not just going to throw, I'll throw any old app into there and say that is part of the PC's managed platform. But some other group could come along and say, hey, we'll take the core, we'll take what is in the Flower release, and we're going to throw our crazy weird apps in there because our library base really likes these and they're fine with it and we trust them. So you could re-roll that as a separate thing that would have some overlap with what PC is releasing, but is also in some way distinct. And I think I've completely lost my thread, so I'll toss.
Well, the example that you just gave is very interesting and technically possible with what's being proposed. So it's important to be mindful of that, I suppose.
So floating around here somewhere is also the question of what is enough functional or technical change to trigger a new review?
Yeah. So that was one of the other stickies is, kind of re-reviewing modules or reviewing existing modules, which has been a question in the air for as long as this process has been around. Guys, give yourselves a hand. Y'all did it. Y'all made it all the way to the end. That's WOLFcon, right? That's awesome. Thank you so much. These ideas are invaluable, and they are definitely going to be part of our future discussions as we dig into this process. So thank y'all.